has been reading the French daily Le Monde. And Kyle, you say that Le Monde has been looking at the massive protests against same-sex marriage. And for those who wonder whether they're really in the minority, that's the people who are protesting against same-sex marriage, correct?
That's right. I mean, we've seen them parading in the streets. They seem to be in enormous numbers, certainly outnumbering those who are in support of same-sex marriage in some cases. Certainly recently, they've been out in the streets by their hundreds of thousands. And Le Monde is picking it apart, really, wondering, okay, well, if they are in the minority, why are they so numerous? How do they manage to get so organized? And we're picking apart the numbers, looking at who they are, really. And so in the back pages of Le Monde, we see that, you know, these are people who are largely Catholic, the vast majority of them are, and they're highly organized, so they can manage to get these people out, you know, on a regular basis and in short notice. And the Le Monde also looks at, you know, just how we've come to this state of affairs. You know, okay, they are in the minority, but it wasn't long ago that the demographics were completely the opposite. You know, they say back in the 1980s, only about 29% of the population was even in support of the idea of same-sex marriage, and now it's more than double. It's actually 84%, the figure quoted back in 2012. So they're really looking at the numbers as to, you know, on the one hand, it looks like a big deal out on the streets, but demographically, you know, the number has fallen, and it's getting less and less every year.
You're right. They're making their voice heard, but they're not actually very representative of the French population.
Very strong, very vocal, but still a minority.
And you also took an interest in a story about the often discussed moralization of French politics. How is that going to happen?
Yes, well, how is it going to happen indeed? That's the question on many people's lips, and particularly those who are looking at François Hollande. One of his answers to that question is, okay, well, we're going to start with the conflict of interest and try to, you know, avoid, he's been working on this for a long time, trying to avoid MPs having these multiple positions, particularly people in the government. And, you know, that is to say, as we were talking about it earlier, you know, doctors, lawyers, normally they move on to politics and they leave their other jobs behind. Well, a lot of people maintain their positions, and it leads to potential conflicts of interest. Libération looks at this new post that was created last year, and it's basically a woman who is going to be this arbiter, or kind of a judge, as to what constitutes a conflict of interest and how best to manage that. Now, the language is a bit soft, and I think this is what Hollande is being criticized for, because he says that, you know, he said last year there will be some jobs that will just be out of the question. We won't allow them to hold such a job and be, you know, in Parliament at the same time. But he didn't specify what those jobs were. So, you know, this is the kind of, it's a mix of high ambition, but, you know, very low on detail.
Very low on detail. And from what I understand, the conservative daily Le Figaro is getting ready to mark the government's first year in power. That should be interesting.
Should be interesting. It already is, really. I mean, over the past year, I don't know about you, but I've not seen a lot of articles in Le Figaro that have lauded the François Hollande government.
Well, they campaigned against François Hollande, so it was to be expected.
And indeed, and then for a whole 12 months, they seem to have, you know, held on to that flag of opposition almost single-handedly. But, you know, they have come up with some new news this time round, yet another poll, and this one reaching yet a new low, 26% support across the population, record low. And Le Figaro was saying even Sarkozy, if were he to run for office right now, he would beat Hollande. So quite astounding. They said, listen, okay, be careful of polls. They contain many truths, and they go on to say, you know, he's going to have to, you know, come up with some more draconian measures, cut taxes, implement the kinds of reforms that the country needs, shrink the state, all the kinds of things you'd expect to hear from Le Figaro. But it does go on to say, you know, that if he were to do any of this, he could at least bump up his numbers a bit.
And maybe
we have time for one last article, do we?
Just a little bit of time.
Just a bit of time. Last article, a very heartwarming story. 26 million euros has gone to a 40-year-old mother of a large family. She's a cleaner. She needed financial aid at the end of the month. A lot of times she needed, you know, the Red Cross to kick in a few bucks to pay her bills. Now she's just won 26 million euros. Fantastic news. That is.
All right. Thank you very much, Kyle Brown. We'll have more from the press review from you later on. Thank you very much. A recap of the main stories on France.